Hey guys, and welcome back to the Mudstudsskullcaps podcast. I'm Robin.
And I'm Kelsey, and in today's episode, we're going to be sharing what our at-home setups are for our horses. They're not glamorous barns or rolling pastures, but it's enough to keep everyone happy and healthy. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out last week's episode. We broke down each of the factors we consider when deciding how often or how much we should ride our horses each week. This also included the discovery that horses walk about 20 miles or more in a day while they're in the wild, and that if your horse doesn't get enough turnout, you're likely trying to make this up with your rides. So go ahead and listen to that episode. It's a great one. Also, if you listen on Apple iTunes, on that Purple Podcast app, we would love if you could leave us a review or just a star rating too. It's very helpful. The reason for this is that the podcast app has this way of ranking podcasts based on their age and the amount of episodes they have, and it can be really hard for new podcasts to even be found when you're searching keywords that should make it easy to find things about horses. You're often competing with a lot of older podcasts that have been around a lot longer. So we're just trying to, for a new podcast, get out there into the podcast world. So go leave one of those for us. Thanks. So for today's episode, we're just going to kind of share what our houses are like, what our barns, not barns, pastures, not pastures are like, and how we care for our horses at home and what our setup is. And like I said, it's not glamorous. I think, I am so embarrassed by my place because it's not perfect. It smells like manure, so you can't invite people that aren't horse people over because they will think you're weird. It's not perfect. It's so far from what I want, but I know we're not alone. I know there are a ton of people out there that keep their horses at home, and they're just doing the best they can for their horses with shelters and barns and pastures and paddocks. And I just thought it'd be a good idea if we shared how we keep our horses.
Oh, my setup is definitely not glamorous. I have a hook screwed into one of the trees in the pasture that I hang their hay nuts off of because I have a fat little miniature pony, and there's no way I can have round bales in the pasture or anything of that nature. It leaves so much to be desired.
So why don't you start by just telling us about your property? Just general, how many acres, what is it, hill, rock, grass? What do you have on your property?
All right, drum roll, please. Actually, I'll just do it.
Yeah, I was I can't do a drum roll. I don't know why you assumed that was a skill I had.
Anyways, my setup, my property is just under 2 acres. It's 1.98, 0.97, something really close to 2 acres, but it's not quite 2 acres. And then I keep 2 horses at home. One is a full-grown size horse, and then one is a miniature. I don't really know if he counts.
He's a quarter of a horse.
He's a quarter horse. But I essentially keep them in my backyard. Their pasture is probably about half an acre, maybe a little bit over half an acre, and then their fence line butts up against my backyard where the dog fence is. And so sometimes if Sean's not home or he's not paying attention, I'll just let the ponies into the backyard, let them mow it down, let them do their job. And then I have kind of stolen the front yard for myself and turned it into my own little makeshift arena. We have a pond out front that separates the rest of our property from the road. So that's kind of our little dividing line. And then there's a tree in the front yard that I'm not allowed to ride past because that's the pretty yard that's reserved for non-horses. But my arena is extremely unlevel, and I absolutely love it because it makes us work constantly on doing half halts and sitting back on our butt, and it's awesome. And then sometimes if we're not feeling like riding out front, we'll ride off the side of the road, down the road here. Though my road is really busy, so it's not the best option. Though we can get pretty far off the road, it's still not ideal. And sometimes I will ride out the back of my property. But that's not my property. We don't damage or anything, but that's not ours. But the one thing that I really can't figure out with my property, because I don't have a lot, and so the majority is dedicated to pasture, dog roaming area, and I don't know what to do with my manure. I don't know how to, I can't find anybody that's willing just to haul it off for an affordable price and do it inconsistently because I don't need it every month to be hauled off. And then I don't have room in my pasture to give up to making compost bins to be able to dump in alternately so that one pile can like compost properly and then be able to be spread. And I don't have an area that I can spread it because I can't just spread it in their pasture while they're out there eating.
Yes. Yeah. Manure management is definitely something I struggle with as well. And it's because like you live in the South, so your property drains really well.
Oh, yeah. I should have said that. My soils are sandy soils. So I can ride in my front yard because it doesn't just turn to straight mud like it does in Washington. It turns to sand mud.
Yes. So me in the opposite corner of the country in the Pacific Northwest, which is well known for its rain and its mud and its beautiful forests. So that's what I live in. I live in a forest. So I honestly don't know how much property I have. It's either 5 acres or 7 acres. I get this confused all the time. I really apologize. I have like 2 parcels. So I have a bigger parcel, which is like where most of our stuff is, and then a smaller parcel, like the adjacent neighbors. I think it's 5 or 7 acres. I don't know, guys. It's somewhere in there. But it's all like woods.
Yes.
It's all wetland. We have like everything is concentrated basically in the middle. So both sides of the property, the front property line and the back property line, are delineated by streams. And then I don't know if it's the east or west. I'm trying to like think on a map. I think it's the south. It's like the south property line, which is like the side. Sorry guys, you don't have a map. But like the property ends at a point because the 2 streams come together. So 3 sides of my property are bordered by streams, and then the 4th is against like a big field that's the neighbor's field. So lots of streams, lots of forests, lots of wetlands, lots of just sogginess. Like my property is just moist and soggy, and it is not the ideal like horse keeping conditions. Like my front yard, I haven't been able to like take a horse into for like 2 years because it's like so soft. They just sink in. There's like one little end that's kind of dry enough that you can ride on and do circles. But like even when we have really dry summers, the front yard never gets dry enough for them to really be turned out on or to like ride them. I sometimes like can walk them back and forth on it in one area, but that's about it. And then my backyard I use as a pasture, but like despite the fact that I have 5 to 7 acres, like my backyard's not big. Like my backyard's pretty small. I have like no concept though of like, I don't know how acres are divided. Like I don't have no concept of size.
I'm trying to picture my property right now because it's all cleared so I can see what 2 acres looks like. And I'm thinking to back home, and I think you only have 1.5 acres, 2 acres that's cleared. Otherwise the rest is just forest.
Yeah. It's probably a little bit more than, it's probably like 2.
It's probably 2 acres.
Oh, yeah. That's probably around 2. You're right.
That's it.
With the barns and paddocks in the arena. Yeah. It's probably, I like the house. It's probably a little over 2, but around 2 that's actually like usable, but part of that has structures, like a house on it. So yeah, the backyard is pretty small. It's not even near like, it's probably less than half an acre. Easily less than half an acre that they have. And that's all the grass I have for them. We do hand graze from time to time in like the front yards and stuff, but it's like they're little patches of grass. So it's not like I can't turn them out in the dry front yard because like there's a tier. So there's like a big wet lower yard. And then there's like a little kind of like the little patch you have in front of your house that is like the only part you like mow and care about. And then the rest of
it's the stuff you try not to let your horses go
exactly across. But it's not big enough for grazing. So that is like the one thing I really hate about my setup is that I live in a wetland and I don't have any pasture.
Yeah, I have pasture, and that's just what my horses are out on 24/7. And then in the back, I have a run-in shelter for them. And it has obviously 3 walls on it so they can get out of the rain, the wind, the sun, whatever they need to get away from. They can get in there. And my mare loves that shelter. She hates a stall, does not want to be kept in a stall, but she absolutely loves her run-in. This is going to be our first winter at this property. And I'm so worried and nervous that all the grass we had is just going to get turned to mud. And it's just going to be gone.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens in your region. Because like, I know what happens in my region.
Me too.
Come today. Like we're starting to get a lot of heavy rains these last couple weeks. A lot of like fall weather. So mud is well on its way. But yeah, so you have one stall. The two of them share the stall then?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty big run-in that they have. It's 12 by 14 feet, I think. And then the ceilings themselves are 12, between like 10, 12 feet high. So they have plenty of room in there. And Trin will spend all day in her shelter. She loves it in there. If you look out, she's out there until the little bug gets her and she has to walk 101 freaking laps in the pasture.
She's got to get her steps in, right? Like that's she's got her little Fitbit on and she's trying to get to her 20 miles. She's working on it.
She's made her own little like pathway and trench around the whole fence line of the pasture because she has her one loop that she walks and walks and walks. And when it rains, the rain just conveniently uses that as like its little escape through the pasture and is just slowly eroding it.
Poor Trin. I mean, she's got lots of space though, so that's good that she can at least move and she has that freedom to decide what to do.
Oh yeah, they have plenty of room out there to move and get around, and they have definitely used it as their little racetrack whenever they get the little fire up their pants that determines they must run and sprint from one end of the pasture to the other all of a sudden. But they have plenty of room. The only thing that I worry about is like they don't have enough area to graze, and thoroughbreds are just challenging keepers.
They can be challenging keepers to keep weight on. So my thoroughbred does not live at home. He lives down the road in a giant grass pasture with another thoroughbred just because he needs to be out on grass 24/7 to keep weight because he just doesn't like food, which is really inconvenient. So for my setup, I have 3 horses at home currently. I think the max I've had here before is 5, which I do not recommend. My house is probably best set up for 2 horses, really like 2 big horses, just because manure management is such a problem and I don't have the grass. But I do have 3 right now. We'll see Hudson's a year and a half, so he's more than half a horse. He's like 3/4 of a horse at this point.
He's very destructive, so I think he counts as like a couple horses all on his own.
Yeah, he's kind of a pain. So for my horses each have their own stall, plus I have extra stalls. Hudson doesn't actually use his stall, mostly because I don't feed him in his stall. I have like a little narrow walkway that he likes to eat in, and that's because like the stalls, there's 2 stalls next to each other with a walkway in between, and this like they can all kind of eat in a row and they can all face the house, which they like to do. One of the paddocks is like a 40 by 40, and then the other paddock, which Addie and Hudson live together, they're roommates.
I'm sure she's thrilled with that.
I think she's fine with it. I don't know how the sleeping arrangement works because they both clearly sleep at night. And I swear I heard her stand up the other day when I came to feed, and he was laying down. So I'm like, do you guys both lay down inside this stall together? Like, I don't fully understand what their like sleeping arrangement is, but because that stall has tons of shavings in it, I can tell they both lay down at night. But there are like other paddocks, and the paddock they live in is really big. It's like narrow in the beginning, and then it opens up to like a big wooded half mud hut, half gravel paddock. So they have like a ton of space to move around. They can have trees to go chew on. They have lots of things to go interact with. They can definitely trot in that paddock. And Hudson's favorite thing is to like get a running start. He loves, I don't know why, I think he secretly wants to be a barrel racer because he loves going into the narrow paddock and zooming through the shelter into the arena to do like a big gallop circle and like build up all this speed and then like do a big turn. But it looks exactly like he's running through the alleyway into the arena. Like he loves running through the 6-foot wide shelter and just like blasting into the arena, which whatever, if that makes you happy, buddy, like I'm here for it. So that's like how he spends a lot of his day doing that. The arena is in the front and they have access to that all day, and it's probably like 100 by 80 feet or so. It's bigger than a 20-meter circle for sure, but it's about like half the size of a traditional arena, I would say.
Yeah, and the footing in your arena is mostly just small gravel, right?
Yes, it's all gravel. It's like the really small gravel, 5/8 minus, because I've had to order gravel 101 times. I know it's 5/8 minus.
We moved all that gravel into that arena ourselves.
With wheelbarrows.
Truckloads of it,
With wheelbarrows, yeah. That's just insane. I don't know where the gravel goes. Like, that's a problem I constantly have, where I'm constantly moving gravel. I have, as a homeowner, homeowner with horses at home, you're going to move so much gravel in your life. I did last year commit to hoof grid. and I am really loving it. So it's actually not hoof grid, I lied. But like, so it's the hoof grid, it's like this big plastic square with lots of like little circles in it that hold gravel. So like the plastic helps to support it so that mud essentially can't come through.
Yeah.
And mine isn't hoof grid. I have, I actually was going to look it up what it was. It's a permeable driveway paver essentially. So it's not something that's made specifically for horses, which means it was a few bucks less, but it's the exact same concept and the exact same item. They're like these big plastic sheets that you connect to each other. They like lock into each other, and then you put like 6 inches of gravel on top of them. And I use this for their pee spots, and it works fabulously because...
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, because you can't, like, the horses need somewhere to pee, but wherever they pee turns to mud. So I put the hoof grid specifically in those areas. I have one side where I finished doing it and another side where I haven't finished doing it, and there's a huge difference. Definitely I highly recommend doing hoof grid, or you can find similar products at like Lowe's or other traffic supply stores, because it's for driveways and gravel roads, for permanent driveways and gravel roads. But I don't know what brand I'm using, but you can find it really easily on Google.
Oh, the struggles of having horses at home.
Yeah, that there's like, you're the one left to be the engineer and that there's no one there to help you.
Yeah, and then you're left trying like all these new weird things that you think are creative and clever, and then it falls through and you're like, crap, now I gotta try something else.
Yeah, I had that like with a drain. I thought I was being really clever, and I had, you know, that fabric you lay down so that like weeds can't come through, you like lay that garden fabric stuff. I was like, well, I have this drain. What if I put this fabric in the dirt drain and then fill it with rocks? Wouldn't that be brilliant? Because then the mud can't get in. So my drain doesn't drain anymore because the fabric like also doesn't allow water to flow in and out as quickly. And the fabric keeps mud on both sides really well. So like the drain is not rock anymore. The rocks are there, but it's filled with mud, and the mud can't get out because of the fabric. It can't like go to the sides and become part of the walls. It just like, it was a fail. And so basically what happened is it started to like wash out because it's like it's like a French drain right next to my, one of my stalls. And so it started to wash out the footing of the stall, and the stall was getting like a puddle, and it's an extra stall. It's not a stall I use every day to feed in, but it's a dry one. Like, I don't want it to turn to a puddle. So then I've like had to come and fill it in with gravel, but now I still have to figure out what to do with the drain because the drain is clogged essentially.
Oh my gosh, that reminds me of another thing that having horses at home that ponies break constantly or damage with is by scratching their butts. So I have a tack room, or my tack room set up. There's a brick building on our property, and when they're selling the house, they called it a greenhouse. It's not. It's just a building with windows. But for some reason, that made it a greenhouse to them. But anyways, it has these windows on the front side that aren't low, but they're like 3 feet off the ground. Turns out, perfect height for a pony to scratch their butt on. And Trin, luckily it was in the wintertime, so she had her blankets on, but she broke 2 of the windows scratching her butt on it. Thankfully, she had blankets on, thick blankets, so none of her blankets were cut. She didn't get stabbed by the glass or anything. No one got hurt. But like, why was that where you chose to scratch your butt? You have trees. You have everything else in the pasture to scratch on. Why must we damage things with your butt?
Yeah, that like butt scratching is a pain in the butt.
Literally for all of us.
For all of us. So I do have those like rubber scratching posts. Like you can buy, they're like little tiny mats, and you like screw them to the wall.
Do they actually use those? Because I've looked into them.
So they did originally, and then they forgot about them. So like, I don't know how to remind them that they exist, but it's really frustrating. Like, I have several trees. Please go scratch your butt on the tree. The trees are big. The trees like look like they can handle it. Somebody found the one rotted post this week and decided to scratch their butt on it and like collapse 2 sections of my fence. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna, thanks. I can't get mad at you. I knew that was a bad post. I knew this was going to happen. I was just hoping no one else noticed. But someone noticed and scratched their butt on it, and I came and like my fence was collapsed. And I was like, thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, another place my guys like to rub on. We have a flagpole in the pasture. That now has a dangerous tilt to it. And then the fence in between the dog area and the horses, the mini loves to rub his entire body on it. Like, whole body just into the fence.
Oh, does he do like he just rubs his whole body, like leans on it?
Yes. He puts his entire body, like, you know the scene in movies where somebody runs into like a glass window and then they slowly slide down it? That's what he does to the fence.
Yeah, no, I know.
He just like, his body just slowly slides down it. And he loves to antagonize the dogs with that. And I just know one day I'm going to come home to the fence being broken down between the ponies and the dogs. It's just going to be a free-for-all. Ugh.
Oh, what kind of fencing do you have?
So for the pasture, for the horse pasture, it has 2x6s are our boards, and then we have 4x4 posts in the ground, and it's about 4 feet high with 3 2x6s as the rails. And then for the fence where it comes together to meet in between where the dogs and the horses go, we had to make it dog proof, but we also wanted the fence to kind of match. We did it, once again, it's still 4 foot high, 4x4 posts, and then there's a 2x6 at the very top, and then a 2x6 at the very bottom, and in the middle we have wire mesh, which is like the inch by inch squares on it, which looks great to start off with, but after a few months of dogs jumping on it and an entire mini throwing his body weight into it, it starts to sag. So we'll see how long it lasts.
I know that stuff is like no climb. Isn't that the kind of fencing? It's like a no climb fencing, but it just stretches.
Oh, it invites them to climb it.
Because that's what is at the barn where I board Dublin, and Ice, like 2 horses, they don't care. But that's what allowed Hudson. He was able to like stretch it, or it had already been stretched. The fence was old. I don't blame Hudson at all. But it was that kind of fencing where he didn't damage the fence. He just rolled it and was able to go over the top and go hang out with other horses.
Yeah, it certainly bends and moves more than we thought it would, more than we anticipated. It's holding for now, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think we're slowly making the change to mostly metal paneling for our fences. I really like the Noble panel fencing that they have. It's like so expensive, but it looks really nice. It's really easy to maintain. My horses like can scratch their butt on it without breaking all the boards. But I just have a lot of like older wooden fences, and they have an age on them, and a lot of them are getting to that age. Or like the horses can easily push them around and move like posts and things that aren't cemented, because not every post is cemented.
Yeah, the fencing that I really don't like that so many barns use, it's all over the place, no matter where you go, East Coast, West Coast, South, North. It's that white plastic vinyl fencing. And the problem with that is as soon as horses figure out that they can just lean against it and pop boards out with their chest, you're done for. You're screwed.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like the one at the barn I board at, they have a bunch of it.
Yeah, and it gets so brittle and dried out in the sun, and that eventually if someone were to kick it or something, it just shatters and it becomes brittle and breakable, and I don't like it. But anyways, what's your tack room and hay setup looking like? Because I know yours is a little bit different than mine.
So everything is stored in a different location and nothing is near each other. The hay, I have like a random hay shed in the middle of the woods that is nowhere near the driveway. So
it's not even a finished building.
It's not even a finished building. It's got one side, which is metal, like old metal roofing. It looks good. That one side looks nice.
Yes.
The other side's a tarp that desperately needs to be replaced. There's no door on the front, so wind and rain and stuff gets blown in constantly. I mean, it's dry, but like just moisture in the air is not great for hay, but it happens. Some of my hay, the grass hay does not mold very quickly, so I don't worry about that too much, but the alfalfa molds really quickly, so I have to keep that wrapped up constantly, otherwise it just goes. And then like one side is our wood shed for the fire stove. It's a pain in the butt because it's got like just a bunch of plywood and wood to make a floor, which isn't a real floor. It's a pain in the butt, overlapping floor. And I tore it apart this last week and raked out all the moldy hay because we have not moved the floor of that shelter in how many years? A lot of years. One day I'm going to put in a real floor, but I have not done that today. So I have to hand cart all my hay over, which is a big pain in the butt. My next house, the barn and the driveway will be real close together, so I don't have to hand cart my hay. My tack room used to be an old building, so before they built the house I live in, they built a test cabin on the property, and that test cabin was the tack room for the longest time, but now the test cabin has too big of a moisture issue for me to keep my tack out there and feel comfortable keeping my tack out there. And honestly, like, we need it for storage of other things that aren't as moisture sensitive. I keep my tack in a spare bedroom upstairs, which is fantastic because have you ever tried to carry a Western saddle with metal stirrups down the stairs? Yes. Or up the stairs for that matter.
Do your stirrups clang on your shins or your stairs?
Both. It will clang on anything. It's not particular.
It's funny because I have one saddle in the house. My tack room isn't climate controlled, but it's not bad. And Sean is frustrated with one saddle in the home.
Oh, yeah. Ben. I've got a whole wall of saddles. I've got a dresser, which was really smart. I have a dresser that's full of polo wraps and bits and pieces and all my stuff. And then I have like a nice counter space because of the dresser. So that was really convenient. Invenient? Not a word.
Innovative is what you're looking for.
Innovative. That's the word I was going for. Really innovative of me. Thank you. I'm really proud of myself for like using a dresser. And then I've got like a couple tack trunks. The one thing I have never figured out how to do properly is store blankets. How do people store blankets? Like, they look beautiful at the feed store when they're all in their little bags and vacuum sealed, but they don't go back to that shape. Like, that once out of the bag, they never go back. So,
oh, I figured it out. I just leave mine in a crumpled heap on the floor. You know, I sift through them every now and then, see which blanket I need, which sheet I need. Otherwise, they just stay in a mound lumped on the floor with all the dust.
Yeah, there's no hope for blankets. Yeah, I've got them stored in a couple like big plastic bins, but then they like reshape the bins and I can't get the lid closed, and it's just, there's no good way to store blankets, I've learned at this point in my life. So tack room is upstairs. It's also like part office and part cat room. The cats have all their stuff in there, so we have just like kind of admitted that this room is never going to be anything nice. It's just a catch-all for all the loose and unwanted items.
Yeah, I kind of alternate between using my brick building, which I also store my hay in, I store my tack in, or I just use my trailer tack room, honestly.
Yeah, I know a lot of people use their trailers. I don't use my trailer for like anything because, again, we have a moisture problem, so you can't leave things in the trailer either because it will mold. I've made that mistake before where you're like, open up the trailer door and you're like, oh, I wondered where that was. and you see your like saddle is covered in mold and you're like, yeah, that's where that saddle went. Cool.
Oh, I actually did have one more thing I wanted to mention about my setup that is definitely not perfect. And that is that, so my arena, my designated riding area, there's no real distinction between like my yard and my arena. It's just where I ride. And so I don't have a fence set up. And my arena is relatively close to the road. So I'm kind of worried that one of these days I'm going to fall off. And instead of bolting back to the ponies in the backyard, she's going to accidentally run out on the road.
So I do have an arena with walls, but that's like the one thing I love about the property is that because all the property lines are either solidly fenced or a creek, the only way off or on is across the bridge. And so it's happened. Not going to say it hasn't happened. But it's happened one time with one horse that decided to run across the bridge and down the road. So that is something that I definitely love because most of the time my horses get loose way more than any horse should ever get loose. But I can quickly go and either shut the gate or most of the time they're just too scared to go out to cross the bridge and out to the big scary road. So they stay in the front yard or they run around the paddock area.
Yeah, you have a lot of trees that kind of like act as your barriers or borders here on a fence the entire property. But you also have trails around the house, or not around the house, around the property and down the road.
Yes, I do have trails, which is really kind of cool. So I do have a trail on my property even, which is not like super fancy or super long because, there's not really a lot of places to go. And we are like, that end of the property gets really narrow because the creek actually goes through our property and there's like a portion of it on the other side. So there's like a portion of our property we don't actually use or do anything with because I don't know what we would do with it. It's on the other side of the creek. Anyways, so I have like a big loop trail with some like cross cuts so you can like go back and forth across it and you can just like ride the horses around, or I'd take them for walks on it a lot just so they can go out and see things and smell things. So I really like that trail. And then quarter mile down the road in either direction is lots of logging road trails that I can go and ride on logging roads. And then we have across the street, like it's all DNR property on both sides of me. Well, I guess one side is.
Which is just state-owned forestry land.
Correct. So state-owned forestry land that I can go and ride on and explore as much as I want. We do live next to a shooting range. So I don't.
Which, in our defense, it did not start off being a shooting range. Like, people always went there to shoot sometimes, but it was very few and far between until like a couple years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's a gravel pit. It's always been a gravel pit, and then people started using it as a shooting range probably like 6 years ago at this point. So I don't ride over there anymore, which is kind of a bummer because there's some really cool views that you can get up there, and you can like see. You can see so far, you can see cities and mountains and things. It's really kind of cool, but I can't get there anymore. But the other side is a combined sort of neighborhood-made multi-use property. So it is all still state forest lands, but the neighbors maintain horse trails and dirt bike trails on it. So you have lots of really cool trails that you can ride on, as well as riding on the logging roads. And there's like a lake you can ride up to. Well, it's kind of blocked off. I don't know if you can ride up to it anymore, but you used to be able to. So I do love that I'm really close to trails. I just need to like get off and use them more. I haven't trail rode a lot recently. I need to get better at that. I just like always think of it as being too time consuming, and then I go and ride and I'm like, oh, I made it pretty far in just an hour. It's not that time consuming, Kelsey. It's just like I think the walking down the road is the hard part because you do have to like walk down the road for about 10 minutes.
And the road that you have to ride down, it's pretty narrow, no shoulders, and lots of blind corners, and sometimes people don't slow down at all for you.
Yeah, sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't, and so it's just like not exciting. Like it's not a part of the ride I look forward to. But then once I get to the trails, I'm always glad I did it, and I just need to like get better at it. So I've got to like put that on my goal sheet.
I'm definitely jealous that you have trail access because I miss that. I miss being able to just get out of the arena, out on the trails, and it felt like a nice reset button. And here I can get off the road a little bit, and my road, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a highway. It's a 2-lane highway, so it's not crazy, but it's still a highway. And while I can get far enough off the road that we're not right on top of it, it's still a little busy. And I don't really have anywhere to go other than down the road. And also, I don't know what this new phenomenon is or why people, if they're just trying to say hi to the horse or they're trying to be jerks, but people just started honking at horses. Like, whenever I ride, they always honk at me. And I don't understand why. When did this start? When did this become a thing?
I mean, I think it's crazy because in like England, every week somebody gets hit by a car and dies while riding their horse. Like every week. We do not seem to have that same problem in the US, which I'm really appreciative of. But, like, people just don't know what to do when they see a horse on the side of the road. I mean, in your case, like, I would say don't honk. Like, don't be rude, don't honk. But, like, if you're off the side of the road and you're pretty far away, like, just drive by and be normal. In my case, I really appreciate if you could slow down and move over, like, an inch because it really panics my horses when you can't, like, give us an inch. Other than that, like, it's just, I guess, something my horses have to get used to.
We didn't talk about how we water our ponies, how we get water to the troughs. It's with a
hose.
It's with a hose. A bunch of hoses all connected together, pulled out across the yard, and never put back ever.
Yep, really long hose lays across the property. It's probably like
freezes solid in the winter.
Oh, then you have to carry buckets of hot water from the house out in the winter. That's my favorite. It's having to carry like 36 buckets of water in a day.
It's also impossible to carry buckets of water without splashing it down your leg.
Your boot will be filled.
Which is fine at first because it's warm, but then by the third trip out there, it's freezing cold.
Yep. And the worst is like when it snows and everything's frozen and you're trying to go through the snow, but your horse hasn't made a trail you can follow very easily. And that's always like the worst is like this trail. Guys, I need straight lines. Gate to water bucket, but they're like, no, we meandered. I was like, I don't want a meandering road. I need a straight trip. So that's also annoying.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for sticking with us through this episode. If you have any topics you want us to discuss or questions you want to ask us, you can reach out to us at mudstudsskullcaps on Instagram, or you can send us emails at mudstudsskullcaps@gmail.com.
And again, check us out on Apple iTunes or that Apple Podcast app. Leave a review and subscribe.
And remember to stay safe, stay classy, and stay in the saddle.